welcome to ScreenHour with me, Kieran.
And me, Mikey.
Where we would discuss the latest releases of films, series and games, regarding our own impressions and experiences.
In this episode, we're going to delve through our favourite game narratives of all time, mainly prompted by the Last of Us TV show.
I don't think we will talk about The Last of Us, because we're going to do that when we do like a review of the show.
Yeah, so as rightly so Kieran said, number one, purely because when the show's finished, we're going to definitely do an episode on the show, and then we go through the Last of Us games on that. And also, I feel like it is a bit of a cop-out, and it's not because it's a bad game, obviously a bad story at all. The Last of Us is probably because it's too good and it's too easy to choose.
Yeah, it's too easy to put in the top spot.
Too ripe of a picking, exactly, Kieran. So me and Kieran don't know each other's picks, at the very risk of, like, dare I say, of not being the bestest friends, and with good taste, dare I say. And dare I say, you, the listener, have good taste because you are listening to this. We probably may have the same ones. That being said, I think this will be the one we have in common. If we're going to join forces, it's going to be on this one. Probably my number one pick.
I don't want to put mine in any specific order, to be honest.
Yeah, I don't want to put mine in any particular order, but Red Dead Redemption 2.
Yeah.
Red Dead Redemption 2 is...
It's a masterpiece.
It's a story which just... Yeah, it's a masterpiece. It's a story which is beautiful, which is heartbreaking, which is funny. The atmosphere is great.
It's got everything.
It really has. And, like, I forgot up until recently is just how many, like, twists there is. That it builds up so nicely. Has such good character building, and, like, with different relationships, whether it be the father and son dynamic, the mentor and mentee one, whether it be the brotherhood dynamic, whether it'll just be like the quote-unquote strangers Arthur meets, who change him for the better with the Downs family.
You become Arthur. You don't just follow Arthur through a linear story. Like, yes, the story is linear, but you don't just, like, make basic, boring decisions. There's like a morale system, so you can make the worst decision or the better decision, and all those different nuances change the story in different ways towards the end of sort of alliances and stuff, and how your conclusion comes to an end. You know, did you play it morally bad or was it honourable or dishonourable? And it's how that sort of narrative really affects the story arc. Like, it doesn't, like, massively affect it, but it does emotionally affect it.
Yeah, the closing moments are different to how your, like, honourable or dishonourable bar ends with.
Well, it's not just the closing moments, it's definitely throughout the whole story. Like, it doesn't, like, change major plot points, but there's a lot of interactions where things are very different.
Oh yeah, and in the sense that you know, you say you feel like you're playing as Arthur. When you're doing misdeeds, they feel so immersive, like.
Mm-hmm.
We've, like, discussed, you know, when we set ourselves, like, the quote-unquote task and lovely challenge of, like, thinking of these for you guys as recommendations and just breaking them down, I was thinking, do I really want to, should I tackle it as just purely, like, story-driven, as in character-based, or do I tackle it as the world as well? So I went for both in the end, and I think that, again, we don't want to go too much on it, but this was prompted by the Last of Us TV show, and, like, you're thinking, what other good games are prime for adaptations and stuff? And it's the combination of having good characters and having, like, a really lived-in, believable world.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like Red Dead 2, and to be fair, the first one's good, but Red Dead 2, it just, none of it's far-fetched.
No.
Every betrayal, in a good way, you don't see it coming, or you do, in certain respects, which is good storytelling. And then you think about it, you think, oh, that betrayal makes sense, because that's how that person would deal with that. How characters change. There's a certain character, like, she goes from being a quote-unquote damsel at distress in the first 2 hours of the game to becoming one of the best female characters in video games ever.
To the point that she should warrant her own
DLC.
No. I think Red Dead Redemption 3 should be Sadie.
Yeah, it should be, yeah.
That would be very interesting.
My thing with Red Dead is with games in particular, more so than films, I'd say, they really although the ending of a game is really make or break. With TV shows, you can argue it's similar, but not so much with films. Is you've put a lot of time in, especially on a game where you've put 40 hours in, or
60
or 60 even, and you feel it ends, and then you're what the fuck? Sometimes you can be this is shit.
To quote Tom Hardy, waste of my fucking time.
Yeah, exactly. Waste of my fucking time. But as Kieran mentioned, the honourable and dishonourable thing with Red Dead, the endings you get there are quite a way to wrap up half a story is beautiful. And I see how this is I don't know, a backhanded compliment to Red Dead 1, despite it being the sequel to Red Dead 2. Is that John's prologue, epilogue, the ending, that feels like its own little ending in itself, and just tied up neatly with a bow. That's not rushed either. The ending mission when you finally get to kill Micah the scumbag.
Yeah.
Micah's so easy to hate, but again, he's not 2D. You can see him playing Dutch like a fiddle throughout the game. You don't especially when you once you've replayed the game and you've got to save him in Strawberry. Many people just want to leave him there. You're a prick, but you've got to do that for the game to progress. He's horrible and conniving.
I think what you said with the end of the game is make or break the whole experience, right? And with Red Dead Redemption 2, I think it's a double-edged sword, because I hated it, but at the same time, it allowed me to mourn and be depressed. So when you have this sort of epilogue with John, right, and you've got to fucking spend hours building his bastard house, right, and then you're learning about where Micah is, and then you got to hunt him down and all that, right, that whole time I'm fucking watching my little house being built, right, I am just sobbing with absolute tears at the loss of Arthur, right? Whereas if the game had ended with Arthur dying, and then sort of the credits, rolled as you're looking at his headstone on the mountain, and then it was straight back to main menu or whatever, right? I'd have been for fuck's sake, I'd have been so upset and depressed and still feeling that emotions, but I'd have got over it a lot quicker. Right? But because I'm then stuck having to play as fucking John when I've just gone through this incredible journey as Arthur, I was so pissed off that I could no longer play as Arthur. And the more I thought about it, the more pissed off I got, and then the more depressed I got, and the more sad I got, and then the more I reminisced about every little thing I did as Arthur, and thinking I could never do that again. Because there's a lot of games where something tragic will happen, right? But there's always that point where you reach the point of no return. So you can just reset your save and go back and play as that character as much as you want. But granted, you could do that in Red Dead if you created a save file. But the purpose of the game was to continue playing as John. And that just fucking tore me a new one.
I disagree. I think it really goes to the game's benefit.
No, that's my point.
No,
That's my point. It goes to the game's benefit because it made me feel like I could not miss Arthur anymore. If it just ended and was Arthur's dead, I'd have been, upset and whatever. But the fact that it forced me to then play as John and still have to remind myself every single time I was playing that game that Arthur's dead and I'm stuck playing as John, right? That just upset me more. John's a great character.
I think what it does really well is make the original Red Dead is a good game, it's a great game. What it does, going back and in compliment to it, is the writing in Red Dead 2 is so much better. It's with John in particular, you feel the connection to him because of what Arthur's gave up and throughout the third act, saving Abigail, and even in the second act, really, when you're saving Jack. Bro, Jack's a main piece of the puzzle throughout the entire game, really. But on top of that, it's also those closing hours when you're playing as John. When you look at it through the lens of Red Dead 1 now, you feel I don't know, you can feel his motivations more. You can feel his conflict in between with him going back to kill Dutch and Hosier and Bill Williamson.
Javier, yeah, I was going to say Hosier. I thought that's an artist, mate.
That's the eyes. Well, Hosea, close but no Scott. Hosea is a really good character.
Oh, yeah, Hosea, yeah.
But no, that's one of my picks. What's yours?
Well, joint, isn't it, really, for Red Dead Redemption 2? Is definitely a joint effort there. I would say God of War Ragnarok. We have covered this already in great depth. But I think narratively it is one of the best video games out there for the progression from the original game to this one, and the father and son relationship, how that has changed, and how Kratos' perception of a maturing Atreus has changed, and just the accumulation of the events from the first game to the second game, and then the events that carry out throughout Ragnarok. There's so much depth and nuance there, especially with not just Kratos and Atreus, but with all of the other individual characters themselves. So everything's so well built in the exact same way of Red Dead Redemption 2, where every single member of what's the gang? Vindalin,
Dutch Van der Linde's gang.
The whole gang all has depth and characterization, and that's what really made the game world feel so real and so like lived in and not far-fetched. And yeah, God of War Ragnarok is a fantasy game. You know, it's based on Norse mythology and Greek mythology, but it feels raw, it feels grounded and tangible. So it's just, and again, it's very emotive. It is an incredible experience, and I feel like it's a shame not to at least mention that in this particular episode as one of the games is one of the best narratives in all of gaming history. You know, it is right up there. Personally, I mean, I did mention this in the Ragnarok episode. Personally, Red Dead Redemption 2 for me is better than Ragnarok, because I thought it was far more emotional, to the point I was just mentally depressed. Like, I was so emotionally depressed after finishing Red Dead Redemption 2 that I didn't think I would ever feel like that playing a game. I was just like, fuck my life. What am I doing with my life? You know, it was an interesting emotion to feel after finishing the game.
I feel like the God of War Ragnarok, God of War 2018, people think that Saw is better than Ragnarok. I disagree personally, because the thing, like you rightly said, with Ragnarok is that it fleshes out so many characters.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, obviously Atreus and Kratos are the main two, but the other characters still have so much depth to them and flesh. Even the characters, like, you go into thinking, oh, just going to be straight up villains.
Mm-hmm.
Considering even when we were like young teens, when the franchise was about, when it was like God of War, like in the Greek pantheon, there was not many of them would know when he was like, you know, that in depth then, and their motivations were like, yeah, they were very like 2D in that sense.
Yeah.
Again, it's hard to rank them, but as for it being men and then Red Dead 2, I honestly feel like it is like, as in like, I feel like Red Dead 2 is better than God of War.
I mean, I rank Ragnarok very highly. Like, I think the pacing of it is better. Like, for the enjoyment of playing a video game, to unwind and play a video game and fuck around and kill people and, you know, different movesets, Ragnarok is better by far, right? But Red Dead, it's all about the story. It's very slow and methodical storytelling, and it's just the pacing of the action itself is very slow, because you got a horseback ride everywhere. There's no cars or fast travel with portals. It's a lot more slow and methodical, and that's more of a, it's like a long cinematic sort of, you know, slow burner of a video game, it's fucking incredible. Like, they're two very different games. It's hard to compare them, and that's not the point of this episode, is to compare the games. But I'm just, yeah, they're both extremely good at what they do, but they're both different. Like,
they're held in such high regard. That's only what it is, and it's such like for us both, they're held in such high regard. They are like two of our favorite games of all time.
mm-hmm.
So like you can't help just do that. Like you say, Red Dead really lends itself to like whether it is that you can't really rush the game and like you relish in it, and it like really lends itself to that. Like you've taken the world a bit more. Well, actually, you've taken the world of Ragnarok, but I don't know. As you said, it's hard to compare. Another pick I've got, and it's a game I don't think you've completed. To be fair, I don't know. Is Ghost of Tsushima?
No, I didn't complete it. Naughty me. I didn't play it until very late after its release. Like I only played it in 2022, and I played it through the summer, maybe a couple of weekends or whatever in the summer. I think I played too much too fast and got fatigued by it, and then I just jumped on playing all the games or whatever we were playing at the time, and I just never went back to it. I think, I don't know, so I didn't fully experience the story of that game, but I did experience, a whole lot of the combat of the game, which, in itself is incredible, and the different stances and stuff you can do is a very interesting way of being able to play. It's very strategical. But no, narratively, I don't have too much to say, so you'll have to enlighten me.
The big one for me, and like, I'm not one to like patronise too much in like story writing or script writing or whatever, but when I think of a good story, you think of characters changing on a journey, and you think of like what happens to them for them to change for the better or for the worse, or dare I say redemption in that case with their dead, or where it would be like learning to be a better father on God of War. On Ghost of Tsushima, it's how Jin changes as a human. He becomes, ironically, dishonourable in the eyes of his uncle. How the game goes on, but it's how he survives, and he becomes. And it also becomes still caring, but he uses different tactics and such. He goes from being a samurai to being the ghost. But I feel like in a similar way to God of War, it also handles the side missions well. You meet different characters along it, and whether this be the semi-romantic relationship you make with Yuna, which is like. Like she challenges him in certain ways, which is good. As a character, he's forced to think outside the box, and she gives him like not even pep talks, because that makes it sound like a 1980s like sports action film. She pushes him. The other like clansmen he meets along the lines, who teach him. You get in typical like RPG games, you get good gear from them. They teach you techniques and such. But it's also about their journeys they have. One of them has a student which is turned to a bad girl, and using the archery ways to make her own like bandit gang. And one of them is a disgruntled like Lady Masco's a samurai lady whose husband has died and her family got murdered. So she's out for vengeance. It's about like her, you do help her get the vengeance, but it's about her grief as well also. But like I said, it's also these worlds which make you like, as well as the characters, the world of Tsushima is like beautiful. And like you could argue this is a gameplay, like a game mechanic, but typically, it's like when you have an RPG and story game, especially if it's an open world one, it's like follow the dots on the minimap, follow the golden trail or the arrows on the floor, and you feel like it takes you out of it a little bit. You feel like it's also a bit boring and a bit by the numbers, where like everyone spoke about this, but that's because it's such a nice little thing. Is the way you highlight a quest and you press a button is the wind. The wind takes you to the quest, like you follow the wind in like the quest you've marked, or just like the wind will blow in the direction for like a couple of beats, like a couple of seconds, and it'll disappear. So it's like not obstructing you from enjoying like the vistas of like the incredible draw distance of the beautiful island.
Yeah.
On top of all that, like, it just happens to be that all of these games I've chosen, and I presume Kieran in a similar fashion, they've all got pretty good like combat mechanics also. But that just, I know, complements it even more so. Like Kieran said, the stances are pretty cool also when you go through that. The way you get quote unquote gadgets. It's not James Bond gadgets because it's a samurai though, but you get the sticky bombs or you get the blow dart guns and such. His relationship with his uncle is an interesting relationship, which is one of the main conflicts he has going through the game. But I really enjoy that. I thought it was different. I absolutely I remember playing it. It's the only game I played for ages. Literally when it came out, I'd play Apex with Kieran, and then I'd only play Apex when you was online, and other than that, I'd just play Ghost of Tsushima.
Yeah.
Ghost of Tsushima, the spoiler talk for that is honestly just how his uncle, really, like his just relationship and like father-son relationship, him defying his uncle, and like them butting heads of the way like things must be done just to survive, to beat the cattle car, like the Mongols, the Khan, is that he just, neither one of them will submit. Jin's trying to persuade his uncle that, I'm only doing dishonorable things because it needs to work. Like that, he's saying, oh, you can't do this, you can't do that. And Jin's saying, well, it works. I'm the one who freed you. He's the one who got captured, type of thing. And he says, where's Honor? And, I think I'm quoting here, but he says Honor died on the beach like everybody else. And it's just, he learns, and he don't become an arsehole, but I think he just becomes realistic, or a realist.
Evolving.
Yeah, he just evolves, as you say, evolves as a good character should. There's a few low-key mental health aspects it picks up on, which quite well. But it's a beautiful game, so you can spend hours in it. Just silly stuff, even I hate collectibles in games as a gamer. That's probably my pet peeve. But even doing them is quite fun.
Yeah, I like the bamboo chopping.
The bamboo chopping is a nice little mini game. Going in the hot spring, and then that's nice.
What's your other pick?
So my other pick is something I don't think you played. Maybe it's a bit older as well. It's called The Order 1886.
Oh, so I heard The Order. I've heard about this. I've heard that it's quite cool. But I should have got it when it was on sale. But what put me off was at the time, it was billed as a AAA game. So as spoilers, it had AAA prices. But everyone says you could complete it in one sitting.
Yeah, it was. I think the game in itself, you could definitely complete it in one sitting of probably 6 hours or so. If you knew, if you already completed the game and knew where you had to go and what you had to do, you could complete it. Probably 4 hours, 5 hours, maybe. You could do it quite quickly. But if you wanted to be smooth and slow and cautious with it, you could probably do it in 2 days. In two days of big sittings. You could do it over a weekend if you played it for non-stop all weekend, sort of thing. Collecting all collectibles and what have you. But I can't remember when that game came out now. I think that was 2016 maybe. And the whole idea behind that game was that the whole game was a seamless cinematic. So you always had the black bars at the top and the bottom of your screen, right? And it was designed in a way that you would be shooting and firing or something, and it would just naturally go into a cinematic, exactly the same of how Uncharted 4 worked. It was so seamless into its cinematics. There was no change in quality or whatever. The Order 1886 walked so Uncharted 4 could run. It was that sort of thing. But I know a lot of people were disappointed in the game itself for various reasons. Hence why there was never a sequel.
What's the premise? Is it? I remember thinking it was a supernatural werewolf thing. Or am I wrong?
Yeah, so it's like werewolves and vampires sort of thing, set in Victorian London, and it's a game that it has always stuck with me since. That it was just a very interesting game because you met people such as like Nikola Tesla and how he helped create your weapons and stuff, and it's how it's like the technology that you have is advanced for the era that you're in, and that sort of steampunk vibe is so right up my alley. I absolutely love that aesthetic. Steampunk is one of my favorite aesthetics, and I was just in straight away with the whole cinematic idea and the dark grungy London, and then these futuristic like tech and weapons and stuff. I was like, I'm sold. Yeah, but the story itself is about you trying to uncover these creatures and find out where it is that, how they came to be and why they're attacking London. And I don't want to say too much because I do think it's a game you should experience because, like I say, it's not a long game. So, you can easily complete it and get the conclusion for yourself of what happened. But it's one of the games that has stuck with me as one of my favorite games I've ever played that sort of, was it perfect? No. Right? But it was something I just thoroughly enjoyed at that moment in time in my life that I just could not stop thinking about how it was created and how it was done and the narrative itself and the way the cutscenes and stuff worked. It was very enjoyable. And as you say, it was a AAA game. AAA game prices, and I think that may have what unsettled it a little bit, and what some people kicked off. It just wasn't enough of a game for that price tag, and that was the problem.
Only mind you're the one like who's played it, so I'll ask you this: is that I suppose as well as a reviewer or anyone who's played it, if it was as good as you like say as well, it'll only just leave you wanting more. So if it is that short,
yeah.
It's to a degree, to its own detriment. Look.
Yeah, exactly. Like it is a shame it was as short as it was, but I think it could have done like an episodic sort of thing. I mean, this is before sort of episodic games existed, such you got like the Dark Anthology series, or you got the Hitman series, right? They released episodes of different like maps or whatever. I think this would have really benefited from that sort of style of release. What's the other one? Telltale games, how they release different episodes. I think this particular game would have benefited really well from that style. Just so you can keep the game running and you got different episodes and different sort of creatures or whatever could be coming back, and you could create your whole own series from it. But I just really love the aesthetic, the style, and the gameplay, and the story, the narrative of it. It's very interesting. You're working as knights as Sir Percival, Sir Galahad, and I can't remember the other two. There was the woman, was her name Emily or Bethany or Elizabeth?
Galahad on the Knights of the Round Table, like top of it.
Yeah. So it's like Knights of the Round Table, yeah. But you typically played as Sir Galahad. In fact, no, did you all only play? No, you did play as the French guy as well. Or am I making that up? I can't remember back now. It's been a while, but it's a very enjoyable game. And there's some customization stuff you do with weapons and that, but the narrative, the whole point of what we're talking about, the narrative of that game is something that I've never forgotten, and I'm so bummed out when it just never got a sequel, because I was like, it had such potential to go places and become something, and it's just, I'd love to see a reboot. I would love to see a reboot, but yeah, will it happen? Probably not.
We might get one, hopefully it does.
Yeah. We'd like to take a moment to thank you for listening to us, and to help further our aspirations, we would forever appreciate it were you to like, subscribe and follow us on your preferred platforms. You can find us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, Anchor and Instagram with our handle, The ScreenHour. And if you'd like to participate in an episode, leave your thoughts on what you'd like to see us cover next.
In no particular order, but is actually quite a new game we've covered an episode on, is Horizon Forbidden West. I think it's purely how much I love Aloy as a character. She's so smartly written. She's capable and badass, but quite flawed. She's making mistakes in relationships and friendships because she puts too much pressure on herself. Because she's like both physically and metaphorically, for being a protagonist in a video game, the only one who can save the world. Again, with other like what games I've mentioned on here, is that it's the balance of pacing's good. The world is a world you just want to spend forever in.
And you can't spend forever in.
You can spend forever in, yeah. Coming off Kieran's pick, it is quite the opposite. It's a huge game. It's a really good game. It's a huge game. I remember when we spoke about it, actually, I was saying like it took me a while to complete it, which is a good thing. But I know other people have made this comparison, is that it's a lot like the Mass Effect games in the sense that you have a hub and there's loads of alloys there you can do missions with a talk to. And all those alloys, every mission you do with them is a memorable one, or one you think, oh, that's nice, you've got a bit more lore off them and you explain it. You've like learned more about their character. It's just, I can understand like people think the lore may be a bit convoluted. If you ask me, what I like about it is that the timeline is a bit mad, but that makes it more interesting for me because I want to learn more. So like, just because I haven't, I don't know, understood it in 10 seconds flat, it means I want to learn about it more.
Yeah.
I want to learn about the history of it. I like her interactions with almost everyone, especially the villains. Her interactions with the villains.
Yeah, her and Regala are some of my favourite like voice lines. Oh, well, her and Regala and her, I mean, he's not a villain, but Aloy and the leader of the Tanath.
Yeah, the chief, yeah.
The chief, you know, he's like if Michael Duncan Clark was in the video game, that's his character.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But another thing to mention, like I haven't played the order, and I know like Kieran never completed Tsushima, is, though they say this with like superheroes in particular, but for these video games as well, they all have like the heroes is only as good as its villain. They all have great villains.
Yes.
More so like Ragnarok and Red Dead, but they both, Ghost of Tsushima and Horizon or Forbidden West, also have quite a few villains, which really like, you know, these betrayals in there which like stab you in the back, which like, you know, you feel quite a bit like as a player, you like, even when you see it coming, you still, you know, still quote unquote hits you in the feels.
Yeah, definitely.
But no, the reason I chose Horizon Forbidden West is purely just because both having a refreshing protagonist to play as who isn't just a gruff badass bloke, I say, as in we've got from Morgan on there who's like the most gruff badass guy you can have, but she's refreshing. I also like the conflicting world and ideologies of having really advanced tech in a prehistoric setting. I'm honestly surprised, like it really hasn't been done, well, to my knowledge, really well before in a game. My thing with Horizon, which makes it so good as in like story particular details, is just how, so you're collecting the AIs, and I remember like me and you talk about it at the time, and like, again, I know we've done a whole episode on this, so we won't particularly go too much in detail, but is that when you're collecting Poseidon, you're collecting Hephaestus or whatever it is, what they're called now, their missions, I feel so purposeful and they feel like memorable and beautiful. The like the Poseidon mission where you get like, it's essentially Las Vegas, is so fun and beautiful, and then like the way you get the other AIs with the fighting pits, and you mentioned yourself, you're talking to the chief and it's getting him on side. It doesn't, that could have easily been busy work.
Yeah.
But they really like made it, you know, a good way to explore the world, a good way to enforce the law.
I think the Poseidon mission, where you're swimming through water and then you do all that underground stuff and then you come back up to the surface and all the lights are on, that particular emotion and story progression that you feel there is one of those moments that in years to come it's something that you'll always remember. In Horizon Forbidden West, there was this amazing moment where you're swimming underwater, you got this rebreather, and you see all like the neon lights and stuff and fight the machines underwater, and you come to the surface and you see all the lights of Las Vegas shine in a post-apocalyptic world, where it's been flooded, but at the same time it's all just sand all across Las Vegas, and all these lights. It's one of those sort of moments that you'll kind of stay with you.
No, what I mean. It's like a defining scene, defining part of the game. The tiniest criticism I could give the ending of Horizon is that it feels very sequel bait-ish. I remember saying this when we recorded the episode, but yeah, I really like it. What's your other pick?
So for another pick for me, I mean, this is it is very hard to narrow it down to a few picks. I've mentioned Uncharted 4. I think Uncharted 4 is an incredible story, and it's definitely one of my favourite games I've ever played. But I actually think I prefer Lost Legacy, which is the DLC with Chloe Fraser and Nadine Ross, and it's about their adventure. It's got enough open world areas that it's like Uncharted 4. Like, it's definitely a much shorter game because, as I say, is it a DLC or is it a spin-off game? I'm not sure.
I think it was like a spin-off game, but again, I haven't played it, and for what it's worth, even though it came out a good few years ago now, it is on my list.
Yeah, I mean, I played it not last year, the year before, I think. Well, lockdown time, I played it then, and it still held up.
It's not overly large, definitely not as long as 4, but yeah, it's more than a DLC they build it as, isn't they?
Yeah, I just think it is a really great, incredible story, and it's bringing in the Indian history and heritage of Chloe's background, and that's not stuff you typically get to see in any games. The only time I've really sort of come across like Indian heritage or whatever is through Far Cry 4 with the Himalayas, and you got like an inkling of it there, but there's not many games that touch on that sort of subject, and I find it very interesting. And just that game in itself, I thought was incredible. The bad guy, I thought he was really good as well. I mean, Rafe in Uncharted 4 was a really good bad guy as well. It's when I try and think about why I prefer Lost Legacy to Uncharted 4, I'm just reminded of how fucking good Uncharted 4 was. Like the whole pirate treasure and traveling around and trying to find that, and then your brother, and they're fucking so good, such a good game. But Lost Legacy for me, I think because it was a bit tighter, right? And it was new protagonists, a completely different antagonist in a different sort of world and setting of what I've been used to with Nathan Drake. That being said, Among Thieves, that was a bit more Indian based, and that was in the Himalayas as well. And again, that was another brilliant game. But I do think, for me, I prefer Uncharted 4 to Among Thieves. Even narratively and gameplay wise and all that. But then, yeah, I think I've made this rogue shout once before, I think to you or my brother or something, but I do think I prefer Lost Legacy. It's just, I don't know, it's just something about that keeps me thinking, that's better.
Uncharted 4 is a full-fledged game, though. I know I say this full well known I played Lost Legacy, but Uncharted 4 is hours upon hours.
Yeah, no.
I don't know. I can't argue with Tosh too much because I need to play it.
Point is that it's so like close of which I prefer, but I think it's just because that one is different and it's not something I've played 4 variations of already, but it's got that same formula that I love, just with a new skin.
I was tempted to put Uncharted 4 on there, but it's emotional and there's some mad bits in there. But I feel like if I was to compare it as a film with Uncharted 4, it's a great blockbuster film, but it wouldn't win any Oscars for its emotions or anything like that. That's the way how I'd compare it if I wanted to use that metaphor.
I think I'm inclined to agree.
because it's what carries Uncharted 4 is the set pieces, is the humour, the action, the camaraderie. Don't get me wrong. So like it is great, but like I feel like it'd be a great blockbuster. Where opposed, if you did adapt Red Dead 2 as a like 2.5 hour, 3 hour film, you could get an Oscar for that.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not saying like the Oscars the be all and end all of a success of a film. For God's sake, there's been so many stuff during the years.
Yeah, there's been a lot of Oscar films that I thought of shit.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a game that I've left off this list that I think you probably thought I'd add to the list.
Yeah, I've got quite a few honorable mentions, but like you go first. Go on.
I really want to add The Witcher 3 onto the list of, some of the best game narratives out there. But when I really think about it, it's not incredibly narratively heavy. There's obviously the story arc and the in Witcher 3 it's finding Yennefer, and then with Yennefer you're then having to find Ciri and protect her from the Wild Hunt, who are trying to find her because of her elder blood, right? And that is the simplicity of the story there, right? But what makes the story so great is everything else that leads up to those plot points. So narratively, it's completely different to Red Dead Redemption 2, completely different to Ragnarok, different to Ghost of Tsushima, completely different to Horizon Forbidden West. It's completely different to The Order 1886. It's a completely different sort of narrative progression of. It's more about side missions and side quests of what makes The Witcher so great. So that's the only reason I've had to sort of leave it off this list, is because it is my favourite game ever, 100%. But I don't know, it's the story. I've laughed, I've shed a tear or whatever, but I've never felt the emotion I've felt through the games I've suggested already. I know it's a tough one. I might change my mind in another week or so and be like, oh, actually, I would add it to the list and I'd take something else out. It's very subjective, so your mind changes, so I can't say for definite, but at this moment in time, yeah.
Nah, like I said, Geralt's too much of a blank canvas. He's like, him interacting with everybody's good, like it's a great game. I'm not going to I'm not stupid. I'm going to say Witcher 3 is a bad game, but his interactions with Yennefer or Triss or Ciri or, even, it has one of the best openings for like main missions of like introducing the village of the Bloody Baron. But I think your game's going to have like a really cool protagonist. And like, don't get me wrong, I know Geralt's like by definition a cool bloke, but I don't know.
Well, he's not technically a cool bloke. He's a mutant.
Oh, shut up.
Mutated to the point that.
If we're no, yeah, you get my point.
I do get your point, but the reason he's not charming and whatever as he is as all the other characters we mentioned is because he's been devoided of such emotions.
Yeah, I know that.
I do understand your point.
So I put one of my honorable mentions is Assassin's Creed 2.
Oh, mate, that's a flashback.
It's got such a good long arching narrative. Oh, that's my point. Sorry, my point was with Witcher. Is like Kieran said, it's the side activities which make The Witcher. The main story itself doesn't really do it for a lot of people. Well, it does. Like, I know it does for a lot of people, but for me, it doesn't as much where the side activities really carry it. But I'd say the story is a charming, like, bloke who goes through some traumatic stuff and comes out, like, if I really want to, like, sum up, like, his 3 games, he goes from, quite a naive young teenager to becoming a wise assassin who's quite got good ideals and tries to help people and changes like the world for the better. But he Assassin's Creed 2 in particular, how he he becomes wise throughout his first entry, but that's absolutely gold. I couldn't recommend to be fair, I think they remastered them semi-recently. I don't know what they're like. I don't know if they've just updated, because I don't think they're a remake. I think they're just retextured.
Yeah, I don't think they're an overhaul or anything. But I have to admit, I think I prefer Brotherhood to number 2.
Nah. I like Cedric Borgia as a villain. When you said villains, heroes are only good as their villains. Well, Cedric Borgia is a really good villain, don't get me wrong. But I think 2, he changes more as a bloke, as a character in 2, compared to the start and end of 2. But my other honourable mention, we could be here for a while, but I was so close to putting it on there, was Spider-Man 2018.
Alright.
I think Spider-Man is just... Again, you feel this could be you could just be saying the game mechanics, but swinging and combat on that is so fun and satisfying, but it's more so just... It's probably the best Peter Parker we've ever had in medium, which isn't the actual comic book itself. He's naive when he needs to be. He's experienced. He's struggling with his relationships, but his relationships and friendships with people are still authentic and lovely and emotional. But he struggles to juggle him and that identity, even when Mary Jane knows he's Spider-Man, because he gets worried about her, doesn't put her in danger, doesn't trust her or whatever. And then his relationship with Aunt May's emotional in that respect. The villains really test him, especially Doc Ock, and how that progresses. And we sound we use this, me in particular, not just because it's one of the few film terms I now rely on, but it's because I think it's quite important. Is pacing is a lot in media.
Yeah.
It's a big deal. And Spider-Man 2018 doesn't, it's an action adventure game, but it doesn't really push you in too much. It doesn't throw too much at you at once. The way it starts with putting Kingpin behind bars is a really good power vacuum for the rest of the game to slowly come out. And with Doc Ock's heel turn, that also happens with methodical pace, which comes really pays off. I don't know what other honourable mentions we got, because there's so many.
To be fair, those are the top ones I have on my list. They're not necessarily my favourite games, but some of the best sort of narrative ones that I've enjoyed and come across. Ones that I've personally played. I haven't played every single game that's out there, but the ones that I have played, those are the ones that have stuck with me the most. The ones that I reminisce over, and ones that you sort of wish you could experience playing them again with no knowledge of them.
I'm very aware this is just, you might listen to this and think, oh my god, what the hell is Mikey on about, or whatever, or Kieran on about. But again, we want to hear your comments or any feedback on it, on our decisions on that.
Yeah, what would you say is
your favourite narrative takeaway? And one we mentioned last week in the Call of Duty episode is the Black Ops campaign. It's an absolute great story.
Yeah.
That's got a good twist. So is Bioshock.
Oh shit, yeah. Bioshock Infinite was a game I actually enjoyed the narrative of. Thanks for bringing that up, because that really, after I finished playing that really stuck with me.
Original Bioshock has the big twist for me, and it's scary.
I said, I never played the original ones. I just played Bioshock Infinite. I remember finishing at the time, and my girlfriend at the time, I was telling her all about it, and she was looking at me like, "Oh, you're so precious. Look at you loving your video games." And I'm like, "You don't understand. Zachary Comstock was also Booker DeWitt." And Elizabeth's your daughter.
But yeah, it's, again, I know that goes down for a lot of big, but both the Bioshock games I mentioned, Infinite and the original Bioshock, has got a lot of good twists, but we're all concerned. That's the topic for this week, really. That's our that's our thoughts on like our favorite narrative games.
Mm-hmm.
Very like smoothly go into moments of the week in like TV or games, which have like really stayed with us. For me, in particular, I've been just binge watching Vikings, like the Amazon Prime TV show, or history. And to get into very light spoilers for the show, what I really liked about the end of season 3 is they go and attack Paris. And the way that goes down, the logistic battle scenes. Say logistics. The reason I say logistics is that it goes down realistic. Their defeat in the like siege of Paris is like exactly how I not want it to happen, because it's a Vikings TV show. You're rooting for the Vikings. They're like bunch of people you're following.
Yeah.
But even though they are the rapers and the pillagers,
It's a bit like that documentary thing. Is that when you're watching a documentary about deer, right, and he gets killed by the cheetah, you're like, oh no, the poor deer. But when you're watching a documentary about the cheetah and it kills that deer, you're like, fuck him off, get him.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't want like the Vikings to lose the siege because good old Ragnarok. And you gotta love him, gotta love the clans. But I just thought to myself it wouldn't happen. Ragnar wouldn't win. Like Floki's made floating fucking scaffolding out of bamboo and sticks. And I thought to myself, well, you just set that on fire and they can't climb the walls. And then the French do that. The Franks do exactly that. They just set their scaffolding on fire and they can't get in. Then they have like a gate they need to attack. So you just have you're not archers, crossbow men at the other end of the gate, and you'd have a big bow and arrow machine. What do they have? Whereas the crossbow men a big bow and arrow machine.
The Franks created the crossbow.
Yeah, I didn't know that until like I started watching this. It's just casual history like that. Don't get me wrong, the bow is a formal weapon. It is a badass weapon throughout the ages. But the crossbow, the amount of power you have behind one of them, and like could pierce armor for the time, and it's so quick. I like the way that battle goes down, and I thought to myself, as for, I know it's quite on the History Channel, although there's a lot of like TV shows and games to a degree, and even more so in films, where you're following the protagonist, and the protagonist has plot armor, and they will just steamroll the opponent or the villain. And you think to yourself, it won't be realistic, or even like, in like an old school corny film where the hero's got shot in the chest, and he's got stabbed in the arm, but he's still like beat fuck out the villain a piece of piss in the fight or something like that. You think that won't happen, but no, I like the Vikings because it didn't play too fast and loose with the Vikings being too OP. And I'll say this, how I've still got another 4 seasons to go, and Ragnar might just become, a god in his own right now, and it might not be based on history anymore, and he might just like shoot lasers through his eyes next season. But I don't know.
Hey, are you? I've seen all the Vikings, and yeah, I know what you're in for. I know what's coming up, and it's you're gonna have a interesting time.
Is there any particular, I don't know, anything you thought was pretty cool?
Memorable moments in TV shows that there's many memorable moments, but ironically enough, this week I've been listening to some music, as you do, but I've been listening to music by Eivor, who is Faroese. I don't know if she's a singer, but I want to call her like a vocalist singer. She uses her breath and her vocals to create.
Vocalist singer, surely that's every singer.
No, but it's the way she uses her breath and her voice to create the music as well. It's not just instruments. It's not singing lyrics necessarily. It's the way she uses the voice. It's incredible. and she's hands down the best voice you've ever heard singing ever.
What about the answer? You can't.
Oh, mate, Eivor's control over her voice is incredible. There is no one that competes. Basically, my point is, so I've been listening to her and to her music and stuff, and she does the theme song and she does a lot of theme work and music in the show The Last Kingdom, which is kind of a rival to the Vikings that Mikey's watching. And it follows the path of a chap called Uhtred, and Uhtred is like Ragnarok, a real person, and it's his descendant that wrote a book about Uhtred, that has written books, a series of books about Uhtred, and then TV show created the TV show, The Last Kingdom. Most memorable, talking about memorable TV shows and stuff, The Last Kingdom for me is something that it's always dwells in the back of my mind as something that was incredible. I mean, there's a moment that I can't discuss at the moment because Mikey hasn't reached it yet, but there's something that happens in Vikings which is a fucking incredible moment, and it's something you'll never forget. But there's also moments like that in The Last Kingdom, and I wouldn't have said Last Kingdom's better than Vikings, and I wouldn't have said Vikings better than Last Kingdom. They're both got very different styles of how they're portraying Vikings and how their stories progress and whatever. But The Last Kingdom is incredible. The use of sound through Eivor's voice really transports you into the world, and it really unsettles you when certain things happen. And there's a scene in most memorable moment, I'll get in there, there's a scene when Uhtred is captured by Icelandic, let's call them pirates, slave traders basically, and he's got his friend, I can't remember the name of his friend, and then he also meets Finan and on this slave trader's boat, and basically something goes down, and the one friend that's on the boat with Uhtred to begin with gets put on the front of the boat, on the ship's bow, like a figurehead, right? And they're just the slave traders screaming at them to pull, so like pull the oars and keep rowing the boat, right? And he says, if you care at all about your friend, you'll keep pulling because you'll kill him quickly. And you're just watching this guy getting smashed to shit out of by the waves, right? To the point he just dies. And it's just the music, the acting, the scene, like everything. And then the events that unfold afterwards. It is just an incredible moment that has stuck with me. And again, it's an incredible show. There are some absolutely top-notch actors in the show. And just you can't mention that show without talking about David Dawson, who plays Alfred. He is fucking incredible as Alfred. Like, it's some of the best acting ever. Yeah, him as Alfred, and the play between Alfred and Uhtred, and the bit where he says to him, like, Uhtred's like, I'm not in any of your murals, and he's like, well, yes, because how would the Anglo-Saxons think about a Viking being in their murals? And there's a lot that goes on, but it is an incredible show, and I think it's worth a watch if you've got the money to afford a Netflix subscription.
Kieran got there in the end.
Yeah, you're gonna fuck off. You're talking about boats and Paris.
Oh, fuck me, man.
Yeah, no, fuck you, right?
Paris, boats and Paris. But that's this week's episode. No, I really enjoyed that episode.
Yeah, that was good. That was.
Thank you for listening. We appreciate it.
And I guess we'll catch you in the next one.
Look after yourselves. See you later.
Bye.
Bye.